As usual, we're going to trace the code in both the debugger and also the iPad, the paper. Let's now set a breakpoint. I would suggest we set maybe the first line over here for the test. Let's put a breakpoint here. And then let's just click on the debug button here just to make sure we're debugging test member. Yeah, we are. Let's now click on that. And we're going to switch to debug perspective. And around over here. I think this is simply some over here. Okay, yeah, I think sometimes Eclipse takes some time to refresh. You just have to click your mouse on the editor. Okay, so now the breakpoint is here, and we are pausing at line number 14 right before we try to create F1, F2, and F3. Right. Let's now switch to iPad, and then we'll try to do both simultaneously, synchronously. Okay, let's now talk about the two fragment of code we need. We need the member class, and then we got name. I try to be selective of the attribute. Of course, we got other attribute like weight and height, and also ID. We don't need to worry about them for now. They are not relevant for the discussion. We got name, and also we got the maximum capacity, and also we got facilities. We got NOF over here. And we got the two versions of the constructor. You can see here we are calling the helper constructor. And also we got our accessor to get a number of facilities. And also we got our mutator to really add in the facility one by one from left to right. Okay, and then this is our test that we just spoke about. And I just try to save some time. I simply just put the templates already. So you can see this will be the template for member. It will only be instantiated once, right? You can see the only member we need will be for Hyun over here. And then we just got name, we got facilities, we got NOF. You can see I didn't put a maximum number of facilities over here because that's simply some constant value. It will definitely take some space for the objects, but we don't need to put it there because it will never be changed. It's a final constant. And then we got 3 instances of the template facility, and we simply got name, price, and units. I didn't include the class definition for facility, but it's rather straightforward. You can look at that on your Eclipse. Okay, let's now try to trace the code. Let's now create the 3 facility objects. The first one is F1 over here. And then the second one is F2 over here. And the third one will be F3 over here. Okay, we got F1, F2, and F3, right? And let's now just, let me just change the color of the objects over here just to make it explicit. Of course, if you're tracing this just on your own, on the paper, you don't really need to be so obsessed about the color. But, for now, that's okay. All right, and also we got another object over here. And that will be pink. All right, let's now do the annotation here. And let's say for F1, it's going to store the address for the facility object is going to be spinning class and also 2.5 and 1. So it will be 2.5, it will be 1. And now let me be very precise over here. String is a very special type for us because we start using the string class even before we introduce OOP, right? We have been using the string class since week number 1. However, it's really important for you to always remember the string being capital S over here. It is a reference type, meaning that whenever you declare, for example, name to be of type string, that means the name is going to store the address of some string objects. So to really put, for example, spinning class over here as a string, it's not exactly consistent with our drawing convention. What should be done is the name attribute over here actually store the address of some string objects, which is spinning class. That would be the more precise way to draw it. But what I drew before wasn't really exactly wrong. I'm just saying to be more precise about whenever you store the reference type variable, reference type value, you should really try to use the arrow to indicate it's really storing the address. Okay. All right. Let me just be precise this time. But if you really know what you're doing, it will be okay. If you simply put the string inside this particular box, that will be okay, right? It's kind of up to you. So spinning class over here. So this will be the first one. Okay, and then F1 stores the address of this particular object over here. Okay, so that's F1. All right. And what about F2? Let's do it. Still, we got Jin, we got 2.0, we got 2. So we got Jin. So this will be pointing to some string objects, which is Jin, right? It's a reference type. And we got 2.0, and then we got 2. And then it is F2. So what I will do is I'm going to make some space over here. Let's say F2. F2 is pointing to this particular object over here, right? Finally, let's now see F3. F3 stores the address of the objects. We got locker 1.5 and 3. So we got a locker. So this is now going to point to the string locker. And then we got 1.5 and 3. So we got 1.5 and we got 3. And this will be F3. F3 is pointing to this particular object, right? Now I'm just being very precise. And what will be the addresses for these objects? We can look at that in the Eclipse, so we can synchronize between the two platforms for tracing. Let's do that quickly. Let's now switch back to Eclipse over here. So let's now step over all the way until we actually have created F1, F2, F3. You can see under variables, we don't have them just yet, right? If I say step over, step over, step over 3 times. So now we got F1, F2, and also F3. Okay, let's see for the address of F1 over here. Let's now copy that quickly. It will be 60 DCC 9 FE. All right, you can also do the same exercise on your paper. And then let's say F2. F2 is, of course, a different address over here. So that one is going to be 22211. So it's going to be 22211. And then 4BA. Okay, finally, let's now look up the address for F3. So that one there is going to be this address over here. I will also copy that. So it will be 16E. And 7DC FD. 7DC FD. Right, so you can see now on my iPad, I have already recorded down address, and address over here, right? So this will be very useful when we actually talk about adding, storing the each of these addresses into a different index of the facilities array. That's what we'll see at the runtime. All right, so far so good. And now let's look at the next line for the execution. We're going to, let's say this line over here, we're going to create a member, right? So let's now, let me now highlight this line over here. So now we got Hyun over here. So that's this member object here. Let me just color that to be orange over here. And then let's now do it. So it's going to be just the name over here. However, we're going to be careful over here, right? We are passing the name Hyun. So that means which version of the constructor are we calling? We're calling the version of constructor that will take a single string value. So that means we're calling this constructor over here. And then the name is simply Hyun. And then this is going to be just Hyun, right? However, the this over here is really referring to another constructor, right? Whenever you write a keyword this followed by the pair of parentheses, that means you're calling another helper constructor. So this one here is actually going to call this particular constructor, right? Let's be clear over here. I'm going to show that to you by stepping in the debugger. So that means in turn, we're calling this member constructor over here. And this over here will be, of course, just Hyun, right? This part here will just be the context object Hyun. So what we end up doing is Hyun, okay, let's now annotate the diagram a little bit. So that means Hyun actually stores the address of this particular object over here. That's what we have, right? And then we're going to execute this line and this line over here. Hyun dot, so we got Hyun dot facilities. Hyun dot facilities is going to be a new array. And then this part over here is going to specify the size, which is 6. So this line is going to make sure we actually say facilities is going to store the starting address of an array of size 6, basically, right? So now let me just draw 0 and also 1 and also 2, right? And then all the way to what will be the maximum index? It should be 5, right? The size minus 1. And then initially, each one of them is simply just going to point to null initially, right? It's really important for you to know. The default value for reference type will just be null. All right? And then what about this line here? The next line, Hyang.nof is assigned to 0. So Hyang.nof is going to be 0. So I'm going to put 0 over here. All right? And then, so then after these two lines, that means we have completed this particular call to the helper constructor. That's what we have done, right? And then we also have to go to the next line. The next line will be, also you can see that this over here also is Hyang. The same context objects, right? And now we're saying Hyang.name is assigned to name. Hyang.name is assigned to the name parameter arguments, which will be Hyang, right? So that means this is going to store the address of the string objects. It's going to store the address of the string object Hyang over here. All right, so far so good. I think that something that might be new to you is about calling the helper constructor, which will in turn call this helper constructor over here. That's something we haven't done so far. All right, so that's about this line here. You can see after this particular line, you can see so many things we have done. We have basically initialized the name. We have initialized the NOF. We also have initialized this particular array. However, none of the indices is actually storing to any is actually pointing to any facility object just yet. But that's what we will do in a moment. All right. And let me just let me stop here for the iPad. Let me go back to Eclipse over here, and we would like to see exactly how the helper constructor is called. Let's see that very quickly. You can also experiment with this. So here, rather than just saying step over, let's say step into. If I say step into over here, oh, actually I click on step over. My bad. If you don't mind, let me do the yeah, actually, if I actually just relaunch the debugger again, so the addresses will actually be reset to other addresses, so it would not be consistent anymore. I beg your pardon. So guys, I would suggest you can simply do this by yourself. So around line number 18, you can simply say step into, which I didn't click correctly. If you say step into, it's actually going to show to you this particular line over here, and then if you say step into again on this, it's going to switch to the context of this particular member constructor. So can I leave that as an exercise for you? Okay, again, I don't just want to relaunch the Eclipse, because every time you kind of relaunch the Eclipse, all the object creations will give you different addresses, which I don't want to waste, which I already recorded previously. I don't want to waste them. All right. So again, my apologies for didn't really do it properly, but you can try this exercise yourself. Okay, let's go back to the iPad over here. Let's now try to execute the assertion, and then we'll see how to call the accessor method and mutator method. Okay. First of all, let's see this assertion here. We say assert equals Hyang.get number of facilities. This one should be rather easy. You can see Hyang dot, right? So if you look at that, so this one Hyang will be the context objects. Get number of facilities is going to call this particular method over here, and this would just be Hyang over here. Okay, what's the NOF? Right, it's quite straightforward. Hyang.nof. So Hyang.nof is going to give you 0. And that's why it's simply just going to match this 0. So that means this assertion is simply fine. All right. All right. So now let's take a look at the first call to the F facility. That will be very important. What I will do now is let me highlight this. Let's say Hyang.add facility F1. Okay. Let's now trace this line very carefully. Okay. Let me use the marker over here. Okay, we're calling the F facility method, which is here. And then you can see the input argument is F1. So parameter F will be replaced by F1. And also F over here will be replaced by F1, right? And then every occurrence of this is going to be replaced by the context object hyang over here, right? You can see this part here. So that means this over here is simply going to be replaced by hyang. All right, so what we end up having by executing this line would be, let me write it down. Let me just say it verbally first. It's going to be hyang.facilities and then hyang.nof. It's assigned to F1. And then hyang.nof plus plus. That's what we're going to have, right? So for the first time, I'm just going to say star over here. Okay, so let me put a star here. So the star will actually be hyang dot facilities. Okay, and then let's see what facility will be. And of course, this over here is also hyang, right? And we know very well at the moment hyang.nof is simply 0. So we can simply put 0 over here. And it is assigned to F1, right? You can see F1 over here. And we are now entering something that we are really familiar with about copying addresses, right? How do we do that? We are saying hyang.facilities at index 0. Hyang.facilities, which points to this particular array, go to index 0. Currently is stored simply now, but we wanted to store the same address as what's stored in F1. F1 is currently storing the address of this particular object. So copy this object's address into this particular field. What's going to be the consequence? Of course, it's going to point to over here. All right. So that's what's going to happen. Okay, let's now do it. So now for this one here, so for index 0 over here, rather than pointing to null, it's now going to point to this particular object over here. It's going to point to that object. And then we're going to verify this by using Eclipse. We'll see that. Okay. It's going to point to that particular object, and then we also need to do the next line, right? Don't forget. We're also going to say hyang.nof plus plus. So hyang.nof plus plus, right? So I don't need to write it down here, but I just keep this line only. So it's going to actually say 0 rather than 0 is now going to be 1. It's going to be incremented. So guys, this will be the consequence of executing this single line over here, which is important for you. Okay. So what we have done is index 0 is now pointing to this particular object, and also NOF has been updated. That's basically the pattern. And we're going to do the same pattern for another 2 times, which I will trace as well. Okay. Before I go any further, let's now see how this is done in Eclipse. Let's see just one time. Okay. Now, if I go back to Eclipse over here, okay, and let me just say step over. Okay, so this is the line we just traced. And let me say step into, right? Let me be careful. Step into should be this one here. If I say step into, all right, so now you can see over here F. What's F? F should be the F1. And what's F1? 60DCC9FE. That's exactly this address over here. So we're copying this address over here into index 0 for this array. So what I would do is, before I do that, I would like to show you this. You can expand, So what's this? This basically is the member, the hyang, right? There's a context object. If you expand this object here, and then you can see facilities, that's the array. You can see at the moment, we haven't executed line 157 just yet. So now let's pay attention to, it's going to change this line, change this slot specifically, right? And we're going to copy over this address into this slot. That's what's going to happen. Let me now say step over. All right. And now you can see it's highlighted. So that's exactly this line over here, right? You can see this, right? It's now being copied over. There's another expression you can write. Okay, let me just show something to you. You can see this address here is the same as F1, which is the same address. Okay, you can do another expression over here. I'll show to you. Let me remove all the previous one. You can see here F1. After the assignment, you can say F1 equals. You know what? Actually, at the moment, I don't really have access to the array because that's private. Let's not worry. So I would say let me get back to this particular tracing later. but I can show to you on the iPad. What you want to realize is, if you see again, facilities at position 0, this object over here has the same address as F, right? Because we're copying F, which is F1, into this particular slot. That's what we did, all right? Just keep that in mind. And then we're going to increment NOF as well. All right, and then we're just going to step over. So now we are done with this particular line, right? All right, so now let's try to do assertion checking over here. So if I do assertion checking over here, and then what's going to be the value over here? So get number of facilities, right? And the context object is Hyung, right? Similar as before. So we're calling this particular method again, second time. So what's going to be Hyung.getNof? Hyung.nof. Hyung.nof is going to be 1, right? So that's why this one is passing. So no problem over here. All right, let me write down some aliasing case for you. Okay, you can see after this particular aliasing, conceptually, right? The private attributes is facilities over here. We can say Hyung dot facility. You cannot write this line like this in Java because facility is simply private. But on the paper, I just want to show you conceptually, right? Facilities. That will be the beginning of the array, and go to index 0. Okay, and then it's really referring to this particular objects, right? Let's now try to highlight the path a bit just to show you over here. So Hyung dot facilities at position 0. Hyung dot facilities, and then go to that particular array and go to index 0, which stores the address of this particular objects. So that's what we are referring to. So this is really the object we are referring to. And the object is at the same time also being pointed to by F1, right? So these two are aliases for the same objects. So I can say this one equals F1. Okay, so that's definitely something I can say. All right. You can also see from this object here, there are two incoming arrows, either this one or this one. Each incoming arrow represents a name, like an alias for the objects. All right, let's do the other two very quickly. So the other two will be very similar. I don't need to really do so thoroughly, but I just want to show you here. So now if I say Hyung dot app facility for the second time, and now over here you can see the argument is F2, and we still got the context object Hyung, right? So now we're calling app facility over here, and Hyung is still the context objects, and then argument is now F2, right? So now let's talk about the second time, star. So let me write it down over here. So it's going to be Hyung over here dot facilities. And it will be important to see, so you can see this dot .nof over here. So Hyung dot .nof, what would that be? So Hyung dot .nof is now 1, right? It's been incremented before, so it's now 1. It's really important to see that. The same pattern, but NOF will keep changing. It's assigned to F2. All right, let's see how this is going to be executed. Hyung dot facilities at position 1. Hyung dot facilities at index 1 is over here, currently pointing to now. However, it's now going to copy over to, it's going to store the address of F2. F2 currently store the address of this particular objects. So the consequence would be, rather than pointing to now, it's now going to point to this particular objects. Agree? All right. Let's now do this. So now for index 1 over here, rather than pointing to now, it's now going to point to this particular green object over here. All right, that's what's going to happen. And then also you have to also increment the NOF again. You got Hyung.NOF plus, right? So that means this value here, rather than 1, is going to be incremented to 2. All right. So that means the next you can see the NOF becomes 2. That is really about this index over here, which is currently pointing to now. That means if there's another facility object to be stored, this will be the index to actually store into. So this is exactly purpose number 2, which I wrote on the Eclipse. I mentioned to you before. I'm going to illustrate that. That's exactly what I just did. Okay, and then after this, we can just try to run the assertion again. Right, this will be easy. So now, if I try to get a number of facilities over here, okay, you can see also for here, it's going to be 2 for sure. You can see the value here, simply 2, right? All right, let's now do finally, quickly. What about over here, when I try to do here.add facility F3. So now the argument is actually F3, but context object is still the same. So the context object is still just here over here for this. And then we got F3 over here for F, right? So let's say this will be star, star, star. Let's say, let me put star, star, star over here. The same context object here dot the same array. And now, what's the value for this dot NOF? What will be the value? Will be here.NOF. Here.NOF is basically 2. So that means this will be 2. Let's put 2 over here, and then we got F3 to be the input arguments, right? This will be easy. Here.facilities at position 2. Here.facilities referring to this array, index 2 currently pointing to now, but we're going to copy over the address of F3. F3 is pointing to this particular object. So what we're going to have is, rather than pointing to here, it's now going to point to this object over here, right? Let's do it. So now position 2, rather than pointing to now, it's now going to point to basically this object over here, like that. All right. Okay. You can also do for aliasing. I already put one example here for you. What will be the same? What will be the aliasing for the other cases? You can see, for example, F2 will be the same. Address as here.facilities at position 1. That will be pointing to the same object as well, right? I'm not gonna write it down, but you can write it down yourself over here, right? Similarly. All right. So after this, if we try to do the final assertion over here. So the final assertion will be the before we do the final assertion, I forgot. We also need to execute this this.NOF ++, right? We also need to do that. So that one there is going to make sure we actually increment from 2 to 3. That means if you want to insert another facility object, it will be index 3. But we don't have that for as far as the test is concerned. So we are okay. All right, guys, so that's about basically what we have. And I want to just show to you one more small detail in the Eclipse, and then we are done for this example here. But it's really fundamental for you to see how exactly the add facility is being updated every time when we try to update the number one about a particular index, what object is going to point to, for example, and also how we update the NOF. That these are the two updates we do every time. Let's go back to Eclipse over here, and then if I simply try to really go all the way to over here, right? So now if you look at, if you expand the object here over here and expand facilities, you can see now we got 0, 1, and 2. The small detail I'd like to show to you, you can also try to verify this yourself. Let's say at position 0, we got 60 DCC. 60 DCC. So that's the first object, right? You can see position 0 stores this particular object over here. That's exactly what it is indicating. What about position 1? Position 1 will be 22221, 22211 over here. You can see position 1 over here is really pointing to this object is 22211 as I copied before. And you can do the same for the third address over here. It will be this address for sure. You can double check. All right. So that's about the complete tracing of this test over here. And then in the next video, we'll try to build further and to give you walk you through the solution for how you can get a payment due for a particular member.